My name is Florence Lam. I'm a fellow at Arup, and it's a company that I've joined since a graduate, so it's almost 30 years ago. How I got into lighting is through boredom. I started as a student that do a lot of science subjects. I'm a scientific student. I started my first universities in natural sciences. And after 2 weeks, I found it really, really boring because I couldn't see the point of a lot of experiment and a lot of theories in there. So I thought I moved into engineering that could be a little bit more practical. And that's what I graduated from the first university at Cambridge with engineering. But even before I graduated, I still find it very boring. It's just doing a lot of numbers and calculations, very complicated formulas to deal with. But at the time, I was fortunate enough to be a recipient of an Arup scholarship. So I spent my second year summer practicing as an intern in their Hong Kong office. I was given some lighting design task, and I was happily doing that with a calculator in my hand and some rulers on the piece of drawing to draw the light layout. And then someone walked past, a director from Arup walked past, and he asked me, "What are you doing, Florence?" And I said, "Lighting design." But by the time that word design came out of my mouth, I just realized that is nothing to do with design. It can't be just a calculator and a ruler and a piece of drawing and laying out lights. And at my time at university, I also got involved with some student production in the theatre and got to play around with the light. And that's a completely different aspect that there's nothing to calculate about, but you're really trying to understand the script, following the narratives, and trying to create something that is meaningful. And I thought there's a lot more to do with it. So I started researching, so what do I need to know to be able to go into design? Because it's an area that I have no contact with, being streamed into a scientific field, into anything about art. And I found this course at Bartlett. And I submerged myself into something that I feel really uncomfortable with. Artists, theatre lighting designers, architects that talk on things that is not literal, not numerical at all, nothing you can put your hands to it. So, and I like that. I like challenges, and I like to be uncomfortable in those situations. That means I've got a lot more to learn. And then the more I go into it, the more fascinated I found the subject. And that's how I arrived into lighting design, and still very passionate about it. So I joined Arup as electrical engineering graduate because at the time, even though at the interview I told them that I want to do lighting, they said there is no such position and no such discipline within Arup at the time. So you need to be pigeonholed into something so that to get your career path working. So electrical engineering is the nearest, and I joined Fort Benning team in what we called R&D at the time. Yes, there'll be day-to-day things like learning about electrical engineering, but also every opportunity is finding something new. And I know I want to go into lighting. So throughout the time, I was privileged to work with a lot of great architects. That is extremely challenging and turn an engineer, 2D thinking, into 3D way. And in the most challenging form. The first architect and project I work with is with Ram Koolhaas on Castro. So for me to understand his thinking, his concept, that was a deep dive. So over the time, after about 10 years or so learning about building engineering, everything, different disciplines to make a building work with architect, I was offered to start up lighting within Arup. So I was one of the founding members of the lighting back in 2000. And since then, we've grown from 4 people in London to worldwide more than 130 lighting designers in different parts of the world. And it also gave me a great opportunity to really see what makes up the lighting overall. And at the start of the time, we know that it's not just engineering, so we need to bring in other people coming in, but also as an individual, as myself, I need to constantly grow myself and learn more and be capable of my members coming into lighting from different fields and how to work together and learn from each other as well. But also great thing is about the lighting is also a subject that is gone through a lot of transformation, and some of them are very disruptive as well. And in my mind, because when I started with Arup, there's no lighting in there. And when I first started lighting in my mind, I said the aim is to make lighting matters at Arup, and eventually lighting leads as well. And I think the opportunity of going through this digital transformation within the lighting field means our team is a lot more ahead than the rest of the disciplines within Arup to have to go through that digital transformation, and how we go through it, but also come out of it, seeing and looking back, and how we can influence the other disciplines that is still quite stuck in the traditional way, and how they can see a new horizon as well. So this is where I see my role evolving. So from starting a lighting team to growing to a global leader, I'm also now taking some of my time to lead what we call Arup University in Arup. And it is a kind of corporate umbrella, not just learning development. It has evolved into more about research into the future as well, and looking at what's over the hill, and understanding this is where we want to go to, when we want to get to, and what kind of research program we need to create, and try to also cross disciplines as well, joining the dots. And it's not just about going deeper, but I think the impact and being more powerful is being able to join the dots up as well. So this is what I've been involved with. Being at Arup, I found people understand structural engineering very well. So I always use this analogy when I have to try to explain what lighting designers do. I said, structural engineers use concrete, steel, timber as a media for them to shape a better world. For lighting designer, light is our medium to shape a better world. So that is a very simple analogy that I tend to use. And why is our role important? I do talk about light being a fundamental to social infrastructure. It connects people. We need it to connect people, and how it connects people to space as well. It goes through the industrializations. People are spending more and more time indoor. So we are a lot more disconnected to the nature. And that means our environments are man-made. We are in a man-made built environment. And that means the lighting is also very man-made. You can see bring daylight into the interiors, but when the light comes through the building, whether through skylight or windows, it's already been modulated. So the man-made side is what a lighting designer could influence. And where we like to come in is being able to shape better of how our 24 hours kind of exposure to our environment through light. And we like to consider all forms of light in a single and a more holistic way. And this is how I see the role of lighting designers is. I think as a firm, we also have been looking into a lot of sort of new technology, emerging technologies. Obviously, as I said earlier, lighting has also gone through a lot in terms of changes in technologies, and some of them is actually very disruptive. LED, when it's first introduced, it could be like one of the new sources, is about longer life, energy efficient, and so on, until the purpose of LEDs is no longer just for lighting, for data. Then that has become disruptive. And same as smartwatches, when it's no longer just about telling time, there's something more to it. So I think we see a lot of technologies around the realm that come into the world, not just lighting. And the future is more about how technologies are applied and how technologies are converging into a new way of creating solution. And I think as lighting designers, we need to stay focused on what we're really good at, being creative, be able to imagine and use our intuitions to see how we can join those up. So join all those technology into a new way of how we can actually solve or create new solutions on problems. I'm really, I don't know why, but I suddenly feel like I need to go back to the roots about science. And at the moment, I'm very, very interested in neuroscience, and not just about all these non-visual things, but really about how the brain works, how the brain of the best creative lighting designers or any designers work. Because when we go through education, it's a very linear process, and And you learn knowledges, and you are taught to do things in a certain way. Very linear, very silo. But some of the best, even scientists who get Nobel Prizes, are the ones who can think in the most creative way. I mentioned about dots. Knowledge is like a lot of dots. You can get a lot and lots of dots, loads of knowledge. And an experience will help you to connect some of the dots of how you've done things before. But being creative is someone who can not just based on their experience, but be able to create something that is meaningful. So joining the dots into a certain patterns that it's really make a difference to the world in a positive way. And so those people can do that. And there's something how they wired up their brains. And so whether it's completely light and lighting related, of course it'd be great if we can connect to that. But is that creativity about light and lighting some of the best legends that I have come across before? How do their brain work? And I would love to research that. The project I would pick as one that I would be most proud of and love to talk about is the Acropolis Museum. It's a project that's most like a turning point to me. I always look for new challenges and projects I've never come across, never done before. And at the time, museum I've done before, but this is something very different. And different in a way that I was working with a client that is extremely passionate about the project and know the subject matter very well. All those various Greeks, artifacts, sculptures, metals, friezes, all those things. And he knows it by heart, and he knows exactly how they're created, being part of architecture in the old ancient Greek time, and how the light should reach it. So he would articulate what is needed, but not exactly know how to do it. And he's also very open-minded about exploring as well. So that's one great, is about the people that I work with. But also because of that, I also learn a lot from him about what the light ought to do, not just technically what it ought to do, and is how that allows me to trigger it onto thinking about using daylight to actually craft the experience. So we would talk to use architectural lighting, artificial spotlight to do all these storytelling, but daylight, you can do that as well. So forget numbers, it's creating that journeys that connect the future buildings with the cities outside, the buildings to present the work is its best, but also buildings that sit on top of the archaeological ruins is how to make those connections with the people through the light, and how to sort of bring slightly tamed light back into the interior space and to tell that story. And I was also sort of privileged enough to work with an architect, Bernard Schumi, who allowed, and very, very collaborative, who allowed us to work together to cut his building in a certain way, to bring light in a certain way, to grace light using daylight. And that is very liberating, to have an architect who actually would like to work in that sense. So really from inside out. And with that experience, that makes me, on any projects, the daylight first, I can confidently talk about how can use daylight in a more creative way and in a more sort of narrative way as well. My biggest challenge in my career, I'm an extreme introvert, extreme. And even in childhood, going through schools, I always got a report telling my parents that I don't even know Florence exists in the classroom. She didn't say a word. It's like that. But in my role, starting from actually having to work in a professional world and have to grow a team and have to be seen as a leader, I feel I'm obliged that I need to speak up and obliged to be at the front, because that's what my team is telling me that I ought to be doing, and it's extremely uncomfortable. And that is the biggest challenge I have to overcome in my career. Yes, I mentioned him a bit earlier. It's Bob Benning. He's amazing, and in particular, I would say really appreciate the way how he's got such a critical eye and critical thinking, and be able to speak up as well. Anything that's not right and not clear about, he will speak up. And so definitely it's my role model. The trip that you organize going to Tokyo, as I would say, is open up a new perspective to me. That's is having that chance to get back to nature and having that time to observe the serious dynamic changes of light, and that you kind of know about, and you took it for granted, and you applied it, you talk about it, but it was never so refreshed. And I think that experience is very refreshing, meaning there is still a lot to discover about light and how we can apply it in different situations. And with the new technology, I think that's even more important, that sometimes we need to get back to the fundamentals, the roots of why we come to lighting, and be able to make that connections, the why side, and also what can you do about it. So whether I still find lighting, I still find a passion in it. Yes, I find it actually through what is still unknown and what still need to be discovered and what you still can explore more. And that's where the roots of the passion come from with lighting. What I found is female tend to, I think most of them, have less self-ambition, but then they're more driven if they can find a purpose of driving themselves forward. So they're probably less likely to self-promote, so they will not put their hands up for any conferences or keynotes. That's one thing I know of with my team. When I talk to the individuals, senior women in particular, that they ought to do more. They need to speak up more. There's a lot of great things in their head in what they've done that is very valuable to share. If I try to articulate it will be good for your promotion, they're not interested at all. But if I said we need those kind of role model for a younger generation, they will do it. It is really quite interesting how we can sort of make that switch. But then there's another sort of personal experience is about the unconscious bias. Even me as a woman, and there was a time that I was at a site meeting in Azerbaijan, and about 20 people in the room. Half of them are Turkish contractor, and then the other half are Korean designers and design managers. And I was presenting, and so everybody's come into the room, sat down, I started presenting. I went through the whole presentation. There was a lady there, almost first one into the room, notebook, everything ready, sitting down, taking notes while I'm doing presentation. And I never took notice of her, because in my mind, I think she's probably a secretary coming and taking notes. And then she asked the most intelligent questions. And she's actually the principal architect on that stadium project in Korea. And I know at that time, because I don't see senior female role models or any senior female professionals in my normal work environment, I just make my own assumptions. And I think, so it is important, if we can communicate to the other women lighting designers, that is their role. If they have reached a certain path in their career, they have got so much to give, they should do it, not for themselves, for the next generation, so they can see we have enough and also values to add to the profession. And I think for the profession itself, diversity is so important to have everyone involved.